This is In the Loop. I'm Bianca Fascini, and since I'm filling in for Christian Bryant this week, I did my best to match his look. And this time I actually got to sit at the desk, though I will say it looks much cooler on TV. Here's what we have for you in this episode of In the Loop. You've probably heard of turbulence on flights, not due to weather, but rather unruly passengers. Now some flight attendants are taking steps to feel better prepared in the air. Then there's a new plan on the table after COP26, but are goals in the Glasgow Climate Pact achievable when it comes to fighting climate change? But first, COVID-19 has been around for a while now, but even nearing 2 years into the pandemic, there are still a lot of unknowns about the virus and its long-term effects. By now, most of us have heard of long COVID or long haulers. Studies show about 1 in 4 adults who've gotten sick with COVID, no matter how mild or severe their case was, will have long COVID symptoms, or symptoms lasting 4 weeks or longer. 27 to 33% of people who had COVID but did not need to be hospitalized developed long COVID. And for these patients, it didn't make much of a difference if they were active and fit or if they had pre-existing health conditions, meaning really anyone can get it. The symptoms of long COVID can range from fatigue and respiratory problems, which are most common, to a wide range of other things like brain fog, trouble sleeping, muscle pain, and loss of smell or taste. But it really does look different for everyone. Today, there are post-COVID clinics around the country working with long-haul patients to figure out how to combat their symptoms and move forward. Some COVID patients, like Steve Peterson, spent weeks in the hospital. He has since been diagnosed with long COVID, and doctors say he'll only have 80% of his lung capacity for the rest of his life.
It's not something to joke about. It's really scary when you can't breathe and you literally pass out.
1 year after Bonnie Bruner got COVID, her symptoms still come and go. She used to be able to spend a lot of the time in the gym, but now all she can do is take walks.
I did go ahead and get vaccinated, and so far my symptoms have improved somewhat, but they're still there.
But what about long COVID among kids? Since the Delta variant has spread and millions of children have gotten sick, we're starting to learn a little more about the long-haul virus in kids. Still, the questions far outnumber the answers. The effects of long COVID can impact kids' education, making it difficult for them to concentrate and remember things. The CDC recommends that parents of kids with long COVID talk with their child's school to set up accommodations for them. Some kids are also experiencing symptoms that they didn't have when they were first diagnosed with the virus. One study from the UK Office of National Statistics found that about 7% of 2 to 11-year-olds and 8% of 12 to 16-year-olds who had COVID still experienced symptoms 12 weeks later. The FDA has issued emergency authorization for the Pfizer vaccine for kids 5 to 11, and the White House estimates that nearly 1 million kids have gotten their first dose so far.
We have plenty of supply for all 28 million kids, ages 5 to 11. Now we are with 20,000 sites, trusted sites that parents and kids are used to going to and feel comfortable. There's lots of locations, and appointments can be scheduled at many of these locations. Also, locations are open for walk-up in many locations.
Doctors say getting the vaccine is the best way to protect kids against long COVID. Newsy's science and health correspondent Lindsay Thies spoke with one kid who's been suffering from long COVID about how it's impacting his everyday life.
Orange, green, blue, purple, brown, and then red.
12-year-old Ian Veras of Crystal Lake, Illinois, knows what's needed to excel at Taekwondo.
A lot of patience and durability, I guess.
But Ian's patience exhausted for more than a year. Now he fights debilitating headaches, stomach aches, and dizzy spells.
All the kicking and doing all the push-ups and everything, it just, basically everything makes it worse.
Post-acute COVID syndrome, long COVID, post-acute sequelae of COVID, PASC. It's all the same in the medical world. In Ian's world, terms don't matter. Long COVID is a disappointing life change.
I get reminded sometimes, and I just feel kind of hopeless sometimes. All my parents are trying to do is help, and I can't do anything about it.
October 5th, 2020, a neurologist diagnosed Ian with post-COVID encephalitis. That was after 3 months of his parents searching for a doctor who would believe them.
He can't go with his friends, can't jump on the trampoline, can't The simple things, he can't do those. You can see in his eyes the pain, is there. And the stomach also hurts too much.
The problem right now with long-haul COVID in children is that there is still so much that is unknown. The latest data shows a little more than 4% of kids who get sick end up having long-haul COVID, but experts think that number is underreported.
There are population who did not have access to COVID testing. So they never knew that they had COVID, right? But they could still now be having symptoms which are related to long COVID.
Dr. Sindhu Mohandas is a pediatric infectious disease physician at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. She says long COVID is trickier in kids than adults, especially in younger children.
One of the things is difficulty concentrating, right? Like brain fog. So how do you define brain fog in a 1-year-old?
What's the longest case that you've seen so far in your clinic?
Maybe a year. It's a long time. What we see is highly biased because we are really referred the more serious cases, right? So I would not want that to scare anybody that that's how long it occurs. In most situations, it's a few weeks.
There's also the mental health part of long COVID. One study showed a third of long-haul adults had neurological or psychiatric conditions, anxiety and depression topping the list. With kids, we don't have any data.
I just lock my feelings inside a box and never open it.
We were eating and he said, Mom, Dad, I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. Hurts too much. Yes, it took everything from us. No, we were so scared, in that moment.
No, I got this.
Science is moving to find answers for families like the Verises. The National Institutes of Health have spent nearly $470 million on 30 U.S. research teams to study long-haul COVID called the RECOVER trial. Hospitals like Children's LA will be including children in that trial and hope to enroll patients soon.
There are specialized tests available through the research study, which would not be that easily available.
As for Ian Veris,
I have my favorite one, which is my spirit deck.
Magic gaming cards and superheroes are the only miracles in his life. He and his already close family, mom, dad, and his pets are holding together, just taking things day by day.
We used to say that we are waiting for the miracle, but the miracle is every day. It's a miracle the way that he fights, the way that he approaches what is happening to him, and the way that he wants to continue with his life.
And they wait for long-haul answers and for Ian to heal. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
Thank you, Lindsay. After trick-or-treating was over this year, there was a huge spike in COVID cases among kids. While many of those cases were not severe, there is a rare and complicated side effect some kids can experience. National correspondent Usher Qureshi tells us more about multi-system inflammatory syndrome and what symptoms parents should be on the lookout for.
Well, that one maybe isn't ready to go yet.
Paige Bendersky's family had been taking every precaution during the pandemic. The 7-year-old hadn't tested positive for coronavirus, but something was wrong.
I felt sick and I only would eat hot dogs.
With a 104 temperature, lethargy, and headache, Paige's mom was getting concerned.
She had a temp and it wasn't going down. And then I saw that she wasn't eating, she wasn't drinking.
Paige was rushed to the hospital and then to the intensive care unit.
Her blood pressure started to drop, and so they had to put a central line in order to start the treatment.
She was diagnosed with multi-system inflammatory syndrome, or MIS-C, a rare complication of COVID-19 that mostly affects school-aged children.
She was tested, came out negative every time. I didn't even think about COVID at that. I just thought, okay, maybe it's pneumonia.
They didn't know she had COVID. And then weeks later, she gets this very serious inflammatory response. And the only reason we know is because she has antibodies against COVID infection.
Symptoms of MIS-C appear weeks after a COVID infection. It can cause inflammation in the heart, lungs, kidneys, brain, or gastrointestinal organs.
Some of these children are actually in shock when we see them. And so we have to give them treatment based on whatever is the dysfunction of their organs.
Numerous state officials say they expect Miss-C cases to increase over the next few weeks and months.
We know when there's going to be a wave of COVID, we can expect about 4 to 6 weeks later, we're going to see a wave of MIS-C. And that's, again, what happened with this Delta wave.
As of November 1st, the CDC reported more than 5,500 confirmed pediatric cases of Miss-C and 48 deaths nationwide. The median age of children with the condition was 9 years. Some of the symptoms may include fever, abdominal pain, and vomiting. Untreated, the condition can be deadly or have long-lasting effects on the heart, which is why experts say it's important to quickly recognize the symptoms and seek treatment.
I just remember just crying, and just praying that she would make it.
Paige did make it, and as soon as she became eligible, she and her brother Cooper got vaccinated.
I saw firsthand what COVID is and what COVID could do, and if getting vaccinated means that we could get back to normal, then why aren't we going to do that?
The second grader is now back to her karate classes with the occasional visit to the cardiologist.
I'm Usher Qureshi for Newsy.
Do you ever look at that screen time report and just think, I need to put my phone down? If so, good news. We'll be right back with the latest on what's trending, so no need to pick it back up for now. Welcome back to In the Loop. We don't blame you if you might have been out of the loop the last few days listening to Taylor Swift's re-release of her album Red on repeat. But we've been following the news all too well and can catch you up on what's trending. After what seemed like never-ending debate in Congress, President Biden has officially signed a $1 trillion infrastructure deal into law, with support from fellow Democrats and some Republicans too.
Here in Washington, we've heard countless speeches and promises, white papers from experts. But today, we're finally getting this done. So my message to the American people is this: America's moving again, and your life is going to change for the better.
The spending package is smaller than the president's early proposals and lacks things like paid family leave, which became a non-starter for moderates. But the measure does send tens of billions of dollars into the electricity grid, rail systems like Amtrak, and expanding broadband internet access to more Americans. This marks the nation's biggest infrastructure investment at the federal level in more than a decade. As COVID vaccination rates rise and more kids get their shots here in the US, lockdowns feel like a distant memory, but other countries are using them as tools to fight new waves of COVID cases. In China, nearly 1,500 college students in the city of Dalian have been locked down in their dorms after several dozen cases were reported on campus. And in European countries, new surges in COVID cases, driven mostly by unvaccinated residents, are leading to new restrictions. Austria imposed lockdown restrictions for unvaccinated people as it struggles with low vaccination rates and an uptick in cases. The rules bar unvaccinated residents ages 12 and over from going anywhere other than getting groceries, seeking medical care, or going to work or school. And a new addition joins the Sesame Street cast. The long-running children's TV show is welcoming its first Asian American character named Ji Young. She's a 7-year-old Korean American who loves to skateboard and rock out on her guitar. She'll make her debut on a Sesame Street special coming out on Thanksgiving Day, celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander identities. Ji Young and the other Sesame Street residents will be joined by several stars, including TV host Padma Lakshmi and tennis star Naomi Osaka. The producers of the show have said they hope Ji Young's inclusion can help the show address the rise in discrimination against Asian Americans. One trend we've seen become more frequent this year is the return of more passengers to commercial flights. And in the pandemic era, when you pack that many people together, things can often get pretty ugly. The FAA has enacted a no-tolerance policy in response to unruly passengers. Now 10 passengers are paying a total of $225,000 in fines to the FAA for shouting, spitting, and other acts of violence on flights. Just last week, the FAA announced it was referring the most serious cases of passenger misconduct to FBI investigators. Newsy is partnering with the Washington Post video team to bring you more insight and reporting. They take a look at how some flight attendants are taking self-defense classes to be better prepared for certain scenarios.
There seems to be a lot more drama on airplanes this year. The FAA is seeing 60 times the normal number of unruly passenger reports since January. 75% of those complaints are because of mask mandates.
There's the stress of getting to the airport, the stress of going through the security, adding in pandemic. People are more likely to spark and be potentially more aggressive than they might otherwise be.
The FAA has a zero-tolerance policy, and they're getting even stricter this year. They used to issue warnings, but now they go straight to legal action. You can be fined up to $35,000 for attacking flight crew or another person on a plane, and can be prosecuted on criminal charges.
By law, you must follow all directions from your flight attendant.
You know, we're taught de-escalation techniques as being a flight attendant, and so I think it's part of that, just going up to people saying, hey, I've warned you X number of times. If I need to keep warning you, there will be a problem. I'll have to write you up to the company.
The de-escalation that we try to do is, more verbal. We hope that it doesn't get to the physical level, but more and more these days it has been sort of getting to the physical level, and I think it's really important to make sure that you're prepared for that.
Most encounters will never need to get physical, but in recent months, there have been several alarming incidents, which is why Judith and Katie, along with many flight attendants and crew members, are learning to defend themselves.
Get away, I need help.
Block, move all the way to the ground, all the way to the ground. Good, time.
Well, right now we are conducting crew member self-defense training. This is training that the Federal Air Marshal Service has been conducting since 2004. This is important training for flight attendants because it prepares them with the basic skills that are needed for them to be able to address unruly passengers on board aircraft.
The Federal Air Marshal Service, or FAMS, has always had this training available around the country, even before COVID-19. But they were forced to go on hiatus during the height of the pandemic. This is actually their first class back.
Once you have that control, you can just start wailing.
The class isn't mandatory. FAMS will usually let airlines know when their next training session is and where, and airlines then relay that information to their crew.
Honestly, it was pretty fun. Certainly, it was very strange doing some of the techniques on the instructors because I don't want to hurt anybody. I never want to use these techniques on a real person.
They learned how to block, how to strike, and even how to gouge someone's eyes out. Yes, they are legally allowed to gouge your eyes out, so be nice. The things they learn in this 3-hour training session are meant to be used as a last resort. Obviously, it would be strange to gouge an eye out for no reason. But Stephanie says, really the training is not just about learning how to hit.
I think the biggest thing that a flight attendant or a flight crew member can take away from this training is the proper mindset. So not necessarily a specific technique, it's the mind that no matter what it is that you're faced with, that you do have the basic skills to address that and get home safely at the end of the day.
Many thanks to our friends at the Washington Post for their reporting. We have to take a quick break now, but after you're back, we'll have a pair of stories for you on efforts to improve kids' lives. Stay with us. One of the biggest worries for homeowners after any sort of flooding or water damage is always going to be mold. It can be harder than you think to detect, but now some researchers are working on better ways to spot types of fungi. Their ultimate goal, though, is an urgent one. They're working to find and root out mold that might be causing children to develop asthma. National reporter Chris Conti tells us more.
We're about to clean this up a little bit.
There are obvious places to look when it comes to the search for mold.
Oh, gosh. So disgusting.
After flooding from Hurricane Ida, these homeowners were forced to gut their house in an attempt to keep mold from growing after the storm.
And the biggest thing for me is the smells when you come outside. It just doesn't leave.
But what most Americans don't realize is that even after a natural disaster or flood, there may still be dangerous mold lingering that we can't see.
If I put it up to a surface, say a drywall that might be wet, it's going to give you an indication of how wet that is.
That is Richard Shaughnessy. He's a researcher at the University of Tulsa and has spent decades studying mold.
It may be hidden mold and it's there, but you simply cannot quickly see it.
His department recently received a $1 million grant from the U.S. government. Shaughnessy and his team will use the money to conduct DNA testing on homes across the country in hopes of identifying mold, dampness, and fungi that might not be visible to the naked eye, inside homes that might not have even experienced flooding.
30, 40 years ago, we didn't have the DNA technology to be able to get that picture of all the fungi that are present.
All of this is being done for kids across the country.
There's a lot of anxiety and worry.
Kevin Kennedy is with Mercy Children's Hospital. His hope is that by having a more exact science to detect mold, researchers can dramatically decrease the rate of childhood asthma in this country.
To me, it's being able to offer help to more kids by developing an accurate technology that could be used in more homes.
That damp basement in your home might actually be more than just a nuisance. By some estimates, nearly 50%, half of all homes in the U.S. have some kind of mold in them. And when 21% of all childhood asthma cases are caused by dampness and mold in homes, you can understand the urgency of the study.
Your risk is much higher if you have those damp, moist conditions.
There's another reason why the U.S. government is so interested in all this: climate change. During the next 30 years, floodplain boundaries are expected to increase. The average U.S. home has a 26% chance of flooding during that time, meaning more mold causing more asthma cases.
Dampness and moisture, whatever is in that mix is causing the increase in asthma.
It will likely take time for the study to be complete. The hope is to give home inspectors better tools to detect mold inside homes.
In the wall cavity, you might have moisture in there.
And at the end of the day, that could keep countless kids across the country from getting sick.
It's thrilling to be where we are at this point in time.
I'm Chris Conti for Newsy.
From custody battles to domestic violence, cases in family court cover a wide range of high-stakes and complicated disputes. Unfortunately, a number of judges in family courts are not properly trained or educated on a lot of the nuance that goes into some of these urgent decisions. That can trap families in court for years, or at worst, that can cost some family members their life. National reporter Michelle London spoke with Allie Kessler, a woman who had to experience that tragedy firsthand, and is now fighting to change our family court system for good.
That was his most recent picture from school.
Allie Kessler only knew her son's father a short time before learning she was pregnant. They were never married, never lived together, and he wasn't there for the birth.
He wanted absolutely nothing to do with the pregnancy. He made it very clear. He sent texts, he called, he left voicemails.
Allie planned to raise her son Grayson alone, but then Dad showed up, wanting half custody.
So when I spoke to a lawyer, they said, unless you can really prove that the other parent is unfit, they're going to get 50% custody no matter what.
She says Grayson's father made co-parenting difficult. He was verbally abusive and threatened her.
You know, I'd get texts saying, you deserve to have your head separated from your body. And, you know, he wrote, I'm not the violent type, but God will deal with you.
Allie filed contempt motions asking for a psychological evaluation, changes in visitation, and eventually for a domestic violence injunction on Grayson's dad.
And then I wrote in big letters, I fear for my life, my boyfriend's life, and most of all, my child's life.
A judge denied that injunction, just as a mechanic found a tracking device on her car. Grayson's father told her he knew she had been to the courthouse and stopped taking Grayson to school.
I called the police 3 times to get wellness checks for them to go knock on the door. Each time they knocked, no answer. There's nothing that they can do.
Meanwhile, her attorney filed for an emergency order to pick up Grayson. It was also denied.
I get a knock on my door, and it's, you know, the investigators, about 3 officers, letting me know that they found my son in his father's apartment where I told them that he was, and that they were both dead, and that he was shot in the head, and that he was gone. And that's all I heard. The following day, I got a notice from the court saying that my lawyer had filed an injunction for stalking, and it was approved. So basically they're saying I wasn't safe, but it was okay that my child would go to him.
If the average person understood what happened inside our family courts, they would not stand for it.
Danielle Pollack with the National Family Violence Law Center is helping write legislation like Grayson's Law and similar bills across the country. Bills that require courts to consider criminal convictions in custody cases, to expand domestic violence to include psychological abuse and coercive control, and to educate judges and other custody workers on family abuse dynamics.
We didn't realize how broken the family court system was.
Meanwhile, advocates of judicial education have designated November as Family Court Awareness Month.
There are very few requirements state by state for judges to have even the 101 basic training in domestic violence.
Tina Swithin with One Mom's Battle has helped arrange more than 200 proclamations all over the country, helping parents like Ali Kessler bring awareness to what they say is a need for change.
I will not rest until I get justice for Grayson because, John's dead. John killed himself. There is accountability and I will find it.
I'm Michelle London for Newsy.
After the break, we're taking a look at the results of the big COP26 conference in Glasgow aimed at combating climate change. How productive was it really, and are any of these plans achievable? We'll dig into those questions next. There are new plans to protect the planet after COP26, the meeting of world leaders to discuss climate change and what to do about it. Well, there was a lot of chit-chat from politicians that not everyone felt was all that productive. A new deal did come out of the conference. Nearly 200 countries adopted what's called the Glasgow Climate Pact. National correspondent Thomas Hoppe breaks down what's included in that plan and whether its goals are achievable.
World leaders approved a climate pact after 2 weeks of negotiations at the UN Climate Change Conference COP26. It's called the Glasgow Climate Pact. While many experts are saying the pact fell short of hopes, there is some optimism of reaching that Paris Agreement of limiting the planet's warming temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius if drastic measures are taken now.
At the last minute, the phrasing on coal was changed from phase out to phase down, largely at the instigation of India, and I'm told behind the scenes by China. So it's relatively easier for some places to take measures and harder for others. And for India in particular, to commit to phasing out coal would be very difficult.
Fritz Mayer, an expert on international studies, says while they did change the wording from phase out to phase down with coal, just the fact that there is any action on fossil fuels in this agreement at all is a win.
And now, what does it mean in practical terms? Well, again, the question is what measures will we be actually taking going forward? And right now, it's a little unclear. So the parties agreed to come back and talk about that.
However, Walid Abdullati, a researcher in environmental sciences, told me the UN still needs to figure out what they will do for those countries in need of help.
What do you think is one of the biggest losses from this Glasgow climate?
Yeah, it's hard not to respond to that in negative terms, but I think, in my view, one of the biggest losses was a lack of commitment to, I don't want to say make reparations, but to help those most adversely affected by climate change. The lack of deals and commitments to help those most adversely affected not coming through, because the reality is those most adversely affected are often those that contributed the least to the problem.
Moving forward, the Glasgow Climate Pact calls for countries to come back next year with updated emissions reductions commitments for 2030. I'm Thomas Hoppe reporting.
Thank you, Thomas. Now we're looking at another effort to fight one aspect of climate change. There are more than 3 million abandoned oil and gas wells across the US, and when they aren't sealed properly, they can leak a powerful greenhouse gas called methane. According to a 2018 report from the Environmental Protection Agency, those wells emitted 290 kilotons of methane. That amount of methane is equal to burning over 16 million barrels of oil. Without the oil and gas companies taking their own responsibility for the wells, local governments lack the funding to properly plug them up. But a nonprofit is working to change that. National correspondent Elizabeth Ruiz has that story.
It's a windy day in Toole County, Montana, about 30 miles south of the Canadian border.
We're headed out to an orphan well location today.
Curtis Shuck is the chairman of Well Done Foundation, formed specifically for identifying and plugging abandoned oil and gas wells.
Watch your doors in the wind.
Abandoned oil and gas wells, also called orphaned wells, have been relinquished by companies that once used them. These in particular are on private land, and Well Done adopts them through an agreement to plug them up.
The well that we were on today, the Anderson 5, was drilled in 1926. Produced, viable oil for maybe 70 of those years.
Curtis says wells will transfer from operator to operator until the last person standing is out of business because the well is no longer commercially viable. He was inspired to start the foundation after discovering so many orphaned wells in Toole County.
You see one, then you start to see more. And I was literally horrified and embarrassed as being in the oil and gas industry for nearly 30 years. I couldn't believe that in any universe that it would be okay to leave something like that behind for somebody else to deal with.
According to the Environmental Protection Agency, there are millions of orphaned wells across the U.S. A percentage of those wells, like Anderson number 5, are considered super emitters because they're releasing so much methane.
Methane is a potent, short-lived greenhouse gas, which is responsible for more than 1/4 of the warming we're experiencing today.
Stephen Hamburg is the chief scientist with Environmental Defense Fund. He says methane needs to be dealt with quickly because it could cause more warming than carbon dioxide in the next couple decades.
Methane is going to drive the climate changes we see in my lifetime and my daughter's to a large degree. And carbon dioxide will dominate the changes that we see over our grandchildren's lifetime.
The sources of methane emissions include raising livestock, managing waste, and producing fossil fuels like oil and gas. At the annual climate change conference, more than 100 countries signed a pledge to reduce methane emissions from human sources by 30%. When it comes to plugging orphaned wells, Curtis, who provided this video, says it hasn't been a cheap endeavor. It's been paid for through corporate sponsors, individual donors, fundraisers, and even out-of-pocket expenses.
We can make a big impact one well at a time. Every little bit counts.
So far, since November of 2019, the Well Done Foundation has plugged 14 wells with cement, creating approximately 40 jobs along the way. And that number will continue to grow as Well Done scales up.
Opening up an entire new frontier, if you would, in the measurement and monitoring space.
Curtis says the oil and gas industry is in a state of transition and simply needs to adapt. Well Done Foundation has big plans for 2022, expanding into more states like Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and California.
Let's leave this place better than the way we found it. Let's do our part and really lean in, and we can make a difference, and we are making a difference one well at a time.
In Oilmont, Montana, I'm Elizabeth Ruiz reporting.
Thank you, Elizabeth. As we just heard there, methane is responsible for more than 1/4 of the warming we're seeing today globally. This Sunday's episode of our Newsy original documentary series In Real Life traces the global path of American fossil fuels, including the impact of this little talked about greenhouse gas we've been focused on here, methane. Here's a clip from the upcoming episode.
So we're ready to roll? I just have to get a short pair, but yeah. We are like detectives. We drive around the oil and gas field and we're looking at real-time readings of benzene. And when we see very big hits, we investigate and look at what's upwind of us, and that will tell us where there's a source of benzene. So my name is Gabi Petron. I work at NOAA in the Global Monitoring Division, where we study greenhouse gases globally. but we also look at regional emissions of greenhouse gases, and specifically in the past few years, I've looked at methane emissions and volatile organic compounds emissions from oil and gas operations. From earlier work, aerial work that we did in 2012, we noticed that there's a lot of benzene over the oil and gas fields that's not accounted for in the state inventory. So what we've been looking at in the past year is monitoring levels of methane and other natural gas markers like ethane, as well as air toxics, as we are looking at well pads that are being drilled, fracked, and in early production phase. So we saw definitely a plume from this pad with the flare. Here we're going to be able to see the pollution probably pooling and accumulating near the site. We're looking at different types of gases that have different impacts. When we look at a greenhouse gas like methane, we're looking at decadal to century to millennia impacts on climate. Since pre-industrial time, CO2 levels have increased in the atmosphere by almost 50%. So we've gone from 280 ppm pre-industrial to 406 ppm in 2018. When you look at methane, it's even a bigger increase. We've gone from less than a ppm to around 2 ppm methane nowadays. The levels we're seeing now, especially in terms of CO2, have not been seen since 3.6 million years ago.
That was just a short snippet of our upcoming episode of Newsy's series In Real Life. You can watch the full thing this Sunday at 8:30 Eastern right here on Newsy. After the break, we're talking about the infrastructure bill and how it could help fund a new type of technology to prevent drunk drivers from getting behind the wheel.
Sunday nights, Newsy takes you to the edge. Exploring untold stories.
It's literally an existential threat.
Going far beyond the headlines.
Today, social media is the real world.
Hey, grandkids. There needs to be a bridging of the gap.
In Real Life, a next-generation news magazine. New episodes, Sunday nights at 8:30, 7:30 Central, only on Newsy.
Even with fewer people on the roads during the pandemic, drunk driving continues to be a serious threat. Over 10,000 people die from drunk driving each year, but some new technology we've seen in cars, like lane assists and alerts, might be able to help prevent accidents. And now the infrastructure bill signed by President Biden could fund efforts to make some protection standard in most vehicles, just as airbags or seatbelts became standardized. Correspondent Maya Rodriguez gives us the full story.
When Rana Abbas Taylor thinks of her family,
they were killed on January 6, 2019.
What happened to them 2 years ago on their way home from a vacation is still painfully fresh.
Obviously, our world was upended, and for a very long time, I wasn't necessarily in a state of anything other than shock.
The family of 5, Taylor's sister, brother-in-law, nieces, and nephew, all killed by a drunk driver, an experience that brought her to speak up for drunk driving prevention and the vehicle technology that might prevent it.
I could not say no. I certainly wasn't going to say no when the injustice was knocking on my front door.
Included in the new massive infrastructure bill is legislation directing the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to begin the process of getting drunk driving prevention technology into vehicles as a standard practice, similar to seatbelts and airbags, potentially within 5 years. Alex Otte, president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, says it could save 10,000 lives a year.
We don't know which technology they're going to pick at this point. That's what the rulemaking process is for. But it'll fall under one of 3 categories: driving performance monitoring, driver monitoring, or alcohol detection.
Otte says there are currently more than 240 forms of vehicle technology, like lane assist or cameras that monitor a driver's eyes, which could be reprogrammed to combat drunk driving and safely get a vehicle to pull over with an impaired driver.
Of course, our mission is to end drunk driving, but we know that a lot of these monitoring technologies could have an impact on things like drowsy driving, drugged driving, and distracted driving as well.
This is a game changer. We are making our roads safer for anybody that gets on there,
so that other families might never know a loss like hers. In Washington, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
If you're already second screening with phone in hand, give us a shout out on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. We'll be right back.
It's time to see the bigger picture, widen the lens, narrow the divide.
We must love and support one another!
That support is shifting, and it's shifting toward concern for climate.
It's about the whole community stepping up to help.
Not everything is left or right, good or bad.
The human capacity for change is so inspiring.
It's time to look closer at the whole story.
A hurricane don't care what your color is or how much money you make. It affects us all.
It's time to ask, why?
The whole goal is to point people to something bigger.
Introducing a new point of view. Yours. Newsy. Watch free 24/7.
Before we let you go, we're finishing out the show by bringing you back to some of our top stories. First, we've heard a lot about how COVID long haul affects adults, but what about kids? Since the Delta variant has spread and millions of children have gotten sick, we're starting to learn a little more about the long haul virus in kids. Still, the questions far outnumber the answers. The effects of long COVID can impact kids' education, making it difficult for them to concentrate and remember things. The CDC recommends that parents of kids with long COVID talk with their child's school to set up accommodations for them. Some kids are also experiencing symptoms that they didn't have when they were first diagnosed with the virus. One study from the UK Office of National Statistics found that about 7% of 2 to 11-year-olds and 8% of 12 to 16-year-olds who had COVID still experienced symptoms 12 weeks later. The FDA has issued emergency authorization for the Pfizer vaccine for kids 5 to 11, and the White House estimates that nearly 1 million kids have gotten their first dose so far.
We have plenty of supply for all 28 million kids, ages 5 to 11. Now we are with 20,000 sites, trusted sites that parents and kids are used to going to and feel comfortable. There's lots of locations, and appointments can be scheduled at many of these locations. Also, locations are open for walk-up in many locations.
Then we learned how plugging up old wells can help reduce methane emissions. Right now, there are more than 3 million abandoned wells in the U.S.
Being in the oil and gas industry for nearly 30 years, I couldn't believe that in any universe that it would be okay to leave something like that behind for somebody else to deal with.
According to a report from the Environmental Protection Agency, in 2018, those wells emitted 290 kilotons of methane. That amount of methane is equal to burning over 16 million barrels of oil. Since November of 2019, the Well Done Foundation in Montana has plugged 14 wells with cement. Next year, it plans to expand to even more states like Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and California.
Let's leave this place better than the way we found it. Let's do our part and really lean in. And we can make a difference, and we are making a difference one well at a time.
That's it for this episode of In the Loop. I hope you enjoyed me as fill-in host because I'll be here all week. You can catch new episodes of ITL every weeknight at 9 Eastern.